Good afternoon and welcome to the City Club of Portland Friday Forum. City Club is where we bring civic-minded people together to make Portland and Oregon a better place for everyone to live, work, and play. I'm Karen Curvin, President of City Club. I would like to welcome members and guests alike, those of you who join us today at Sentinel Hotel, and those of you listening on OPB Radio or watching on Portland Community Media. The generous support of City Club's corporate and media partners ensures we put on the state's best civic programs week after week. I'd like to thank our media partner, Oregon Business Magazine. Our current Friday Forum sponsors are Bank of the Cascades, Family Health Care Plans, Legacy Health, Russell Fellow Properties, The Standard, and Stoll Reeves. We are grateful for your support and commitment to City Club's mission. Please join me in a warm round of applause for all of them. We are pleased to welcome back Civic Scholars from Roosevelt High School today. Civic Scholars is our initiative to expand opportunities for high school students to more deeply engage in Portland's civic issues, bringing civic education out of the classroom and into the community. This morning, prior to the forum, they had their own Q&A session with today's speakers. Students, please stand if you are able, and welcome to Friday Forum. Next Wednesday evening, we will have a forum on vaccinations. Our Friday Forum next week asks the question, are big-time college sports worth it? You can learn more about City Club events, purchase tickets, and become a member on our website, pdxcityclub.org. As always, we will be live tweeting today's program. You can follow along and join the conversation using the hashtag PDXCityClub. After our forum, we will facilitate a Q&A session with our panelists. Members, please come to the microphone to ask your question. For all of our audience members, please locate the index cards on the center of your tables and write your questions on them during the forum. Hold your cards up high and a City Club staff member will collect them prior to the start of Q&A. And now for our program. Congressman Earl Blumenauer and Alan Ippolito, Executive Director of Verde, are here to discuss what could and should our city look like when it comes to the new economy, changing demographics, and creating an equitable community. Congressman Blumenauer has served in the U.S. House of Representatives for almost 20 years, and during that time has created a unique role as Congress's chief spokesperson for livable communities, places where people are safe, healthy, and economically secure. Congressman Blumenauer is a City Club member and was last on stage talking about federal marijuana policy. Alan Ippolito is a City Club member and works for Verde, an Oregon nonprofit corporation. Established in 2005, Verde serves communities by building environmental wealth through social enterprise, outreach, and advocacy. Please join me in welcoming Congressman Earl Blumenauer and Alan Ippolito to the stage.
Thank you very much, Karen. I'm looking forward to the conversation today, the discussion with Alan. But I would like to first sort of share some of my biases with you. Some of you know my day job in Washington, D.C. Has some challenges dealing with gridlock or how to bypass it. And I'm going to continue to fight for policies to address the problems that the City Club has chosen to highlight this year, from the minimum wage to voter rights to immigration reform. I come back from Selma this last weekend, just overwhelmed. But I also understand the limitations of the current political process, how we've turned the logical and the necessary, even here in Oregon, we've turned it down, like the voter card, although I'm proud to say not in my congressional district. Fear, confusion, misinformation, conflicting values have clouded what once used to be very simple things. Look at the fluoridation gap between voters in our enlightened community and the City Club research position. All of these are huge setbacks for the poor, the vulnerable, people of color. And it set me to thinking there are things we can do to make a difference that actually don't cost a lot of money, that might even save money, that could bring us together and build momentum, rather than flailing away in frustration, although sometimes flailing away in frustration feels good. I've had a lifetime, and some of you have helped me, kind of build up good ideas in that idea bin. And I've had more than a little frustration. But I would like to suggest that there should be a sense of urgency now for our community, because events can pass us by, and if not done right, can actually accelerate trends that we don't like or have them boomerang on us. Progress on one front can move us further apart in our community. You know, I'm very proud of the Albina Community Plan. Mike's here. He remembers. That was a signal achievement for the community development in Portland. It was wildly successful. I walk visitors down streets today that I would have been uncomfortable driving them down 25 years ago. But that plan was almost too successful, at least too quickly. We weren't fully prepared for the consequences of success. We didn't do a good enough job for the people who were in the community as it was being transformed to be able to stay and to share. Well, don't get me wrong. We're far better off for the transformation of Alberta, Mississippi. But it could have been done more carefully and surgically. I have great sympathy for my friends on the City Council right now. And I know they and I don't want the current recovery and the next round of planning and development to be a missed opportunity. This means we must get our footing and generate some momentum. I'd like to touch briefly on 4 things that I think meet that criteria that we can do here now, this year, to help that without wasting resources, and that don't face some of the political and structural barriers that some of us encounter on a daily basis. Number 1, our current agricultural policies are a disgrace. We pay too much to the wrong people to grow the wrong crops in the wrong places, sometimes at the wrong time. When it comes to food in America, we have a two-class society. People who can afford good food, who understand nutrition, who have the resources, the cultural and academic background, the skills, the time to cook. It's a world apart. Those who do not have adequate money in the first place, or the time to be able to shop and cook, the knowledge to plan, prepare, when they're conditioned to have cheap, fast calories, subsidized by our farm policies that literally make people sick. The growing disparity of health in America, despite health care reform, which last I checked is still in place, thank you, Supreme Court, is evident in what we eat, how we eat it, where we eat it. I gave a speech this morning to the Lewis and Clark Law School conference entitled, Food, Eat, Pray. Trust me, if it weren't for you, I'd still be there. It was amazing. And what I described in more detail than I will now, but I'll be happy to bore any of it with you later, is an initiative for us in Oregon to write a farm bill for Oregon. How we would take some of those wasted dollars, redirect them, assault the reality that a package of Twinkies costs more than a bunch of carrots, and that we not only have a divide with nutrition, but the economic benefits are misplaced. We have an opportunity to redirect vast sums of federal subsidies from people who don't need it or deserve it to reduce the cost for fresh, wholesome food, to increase investment in school nutrition, particularly for low-income and minorities, to be able to have more economic impact from value-added agriculture to create more family wage jobs here in Oregon while we promote health. We can do this. Some of you are familiar with Sing Your Own Messiah, right? I'm suggesting sing our own farm bill. And inviting, literally, I've already done this with hundreds of people, I hope to do it with thousands of people, join with us this year to identify what you need for your slice of the action: animal welfare, child nutrition, fighting hunger, a farmer's market or a public market. I mean, think of the things that we could do with agricultural resources done right. I think we should sing our own farm bill. Another glaring example that we have, not very far from where we are seated today, is a 15-year effort to clean up the Willamette River Superfund site. We have spent 1/3 of $1 billion, more or less, maybe more, and we've cleaned up a couple of hot spots and have some planning that will be useful. But in terms of actual progress in cleaning it up with a vision that is affordable and effective, not so much. And the way we're going, nothing is going to happen for years at a minimum. There's also the looming threat that we're not supposed to talk about, is how much it's going to cost and who's going to pay for it. Short answer, all of us. All of us. There are some businesses that have liabilities. There are some utilities, governments, but that'll all filter back to the community. And we all ought to be concerned about that, whether the costs are at the low end of just maybe $400 million or at the high end of $3 or $4 or $5 billion. It's going to be borne by the people who are here. The actual polluters are long gone. There's nobody in office, there's nobody running a company that created the toxic legacy of using the Willamette River as a dumping ground for 120 years. But it's a problem here and now. This has the prospect of being the largest public works project in Oregon history, and very few in the broader community are really focusing on it, what its consequences are, and what we do going forward. Make no mistake, no Superfund ferry is going to design the process and pay for it. If we start now with cleanup that can make a difference, both in terms of making it happen faster, we can spend millions of dollars better. Now, some of my best and closest friends are lawyers and consultants, and some of the businesses that have been involved with this over the years. And they're good people, and they contribute to the economy as well. But not many of those people live in North Portland, Cully, Lentz, and Rockwood. What if we shift to actual cleanup and action and look for ways to spend money that will benefit those communities? One little example that I think is telling. If the fish is so contaminated, and I'm convinced that it is, I wouldn't eat it, that it's going to require us to make this massive investment, shouldn't we stop people from eating it? Why don't we give the parties who admit their responsibility and who want to participate in the cleanup, why don't we give them credit for an early action? Set up a fish exchange program. let's take some of these bright young people who don't need advanced technical education, but be responsible people to be game wardens, patrolling the banks of the Willamette River, stopping people from fishing, and if they find people who are, let's have a fish exchange with fish that comes from Native Americans that is exchanged for those that are contaminated. Now, this sounds to some like it's a little bureaucratic. It might cost some money. It costs a fraction of what is being burned every month, and we'd actually be doing something to keep this out of the hands of people who shouldn't be eating it. Pay the tribes to provide healthy fish. I think it's a small step of something that we can do going forward on a larger scheme. Another example that troubles me to no end. We have mentally ill people jamming our emergency rooms. If you do a walk-along on a weekend evening, you will find people there who cannot be treated in an emergency room. They can be warehoused till they stabilize and they move on. And you will find that they are disproportionately poor, people of color, people who have the odds stacked against them. And my idea of economic development is not spending $25 an hour for somebody to provide elaborate babysitting and taking up space in an emergency room that might be necessary if you've had a heart attack or a broken leg, and piling up costs. I am proud that there's some movement here in this community. We've got a project going with Legacy Emmanuel taking the lead, OHSU, Adventist Health, and Kaiser agreeing to invest money in a psychiatric facility that should open next year and get them out of the emergency room. They've agreed to underwrite the costs. Even though they're still going to lose money, they will lose less money than under the current system. Well, let's think about that. If we can work with the healthcare system to be able to identify a path forward, an action that will reduce the flow and be able to identify savings, shouldn't we try to do this on a larger scale? Because we're not providing mental health facilities, services, addiction. And if we were, the next step is what's going on in our jails and prisons. Portland police are de facto mental health workers. Jails and prisons are de facto mental health hospitals, where people aren't getting the treatment they need. It's an extraordinarily expensive step, and it's not getting us anywhere. Can we do some creative, aggressive cost accounting, track it, and put that to work at prevention and treatment? Well, taking that theme one step forward in terms of prevention, we're spending untold public dollars dealing with the failure of our society to deal with prevention on the front end for some of our most vulnerable children. There's a project that if my memory serves me correct, getting choked up here. For the last 6 years, I've been working with John Kitzhuber on an effort to make prevention pay. And John and a fantastic group of people who are on this committee working in the last session of the legislature, there was some money dedicated to try and be able to do the metrics, to do the studies, to be able to prove to skeptical legislatures that this works. This year, in the governor's budget, there's $5 million to try and have a pilot project to bring this to scale, dealing with infants and foster care. There are many of you in this room who are well aware of the fact that prevention does pay. 4 times, 5 times, 6, 7 times each dollar that's invested. Yet it is nobody's job to prevent wasting tax dollars 12 years from now. They're balancing this budget. They're dealing with this wave of demands, and it's a tough job. But this project might help us be able to demonstrate that prevention pays. And we're working to get some federal support. I hope the legislature and Governor Brown keep it there and fund it, even in this difficult time, because now is the time to make the investment to prove the case so that we don't continue to pay many times more for failure in the future. And it's not just the cost of the dollars. It's wasted lives, it's broken lives, it's damage to the community. Well, I'm getting into the home stretch now. But I wanted to just deal with a way that we might move going forward to take this on a higher scale. Because I don't want the opportunities to slide by. And I hope that there's a way that we can think about the big and expensive projects for the future to be able to encourage people to reach outside their comfort zone, for people to be collaborating with somebody who's not narrowly with their mission, and maybe even subjected to some criticism for doing it, but be able to think creatively about how we get more value. Let's go big and expansive on future projects. Now, isn't it ironic that the editorial page today of a almost semi-daily paper has an amazing editorial, even for what we're getting used to. I'm tempted to say that if you're thinking of applying for the Pulitzer Prize for crazy editorial, don't bother. It's been taken. There was a time when the paper was focusing on the needs of our community. They would be talking about the fact that Portland Public Schools is shipping $50 million a year more from our community to Salem than we get back to educate children that are difficult to deal with in an urban setting. That's just the case. And you get lots of criticism and nitpicking for some of the toughest things in this community. And here, we have a suggestion for a collaboration between the state legislature, TriMet, the city of Portland, and the school district to get a little bit back of what we're paying. The city, to its credit, TriMet, to its credit, has swallowed this and provided bus passes to all the high school kids. It's a great marketing toy for TriMet in the future, but it keeps people off the road. It reduces. If we do, the way that we get our money back, according to the Oregonian, is just run the yellow buses. It would cost more money for a separate system. And we'd have buses and pollution, and the state would lose money. TriMet, the school district, should be congratulated for this and be supported because it's necessary and needed. Time doesn't permit for me to go into other stories that I wanted to, but I'm looking forward to the conversation that we're going to have. But things that you don't read about in the paper, about the extraordinary success that's occurred at Roosevelt. And I'm so pleased that Roosevelt students are here. That community's electric. Attendance retention is up. Scores are up. Pride is up by any measure of success. and most important is the collaboration that's going on. Philippe, I am just excited about what you've done there. But, you know, think about it for a moment. We've got South Lake Church from West Lynn that has adopted Roosevelt. There were 1,200 people there for a workday. They have paid for a full-time staff member, and the school has permitted it. No proselytizing, just help. A clothing exchange. I mean, the football coach, is assistant football coach, is a volunteer. But it's not just Roosevelt. What's happened at Jefferson and Portland Community College, this middle college program, the rate of those kids going on to college is about Lake Oswego's rate. And it is phenomenal. What's happening with Earl Boyle's school and David Douglas, and what's going to happen at Madison, and hopefully we'll talk about that. Can we institutionalize a vision where we encourage people to reach out, where they're rewarded, not criticized, and that the voters, when these proposals come by, expect people to go a little bit beyond their boundaries? We can transform the Central East Side. OMSI, the Innovation Quadrant, maybe what we do with Benson High School. I mean, this is a spectacular opportunity that will create value. TriMet and the region is looking at bus rapid transit that could stretch from the foot of the tram, OHSU, across the largest bridge in North America with no automobile traffic, through Southeast Portland, on a tragic orphan highway, 82nd, that is a drag on everybody. Help revitalize a little bit there. Again, connect to Portland Community College, out to Gresham and Mount Hood Community College. What an exciting opportunity if we all stretch a little bit. 183 days from now, we cut the ribbon on the bridge. And we're all going to celebrate. It's going to be spectacular. But it's also the first time in over half a century that there is no major transportation project, road, bridge, light rail, streetcar, bus, none, nada. And we ought to take that as an opportunity to up our game, extend our vision, think about how we tie these pieces together. The City Club has the opportunity to help us reach our objectives, and I appreciate what you have done. I also appreciate that just the incentive of making a presentation. Almost 30 years ago, I gave a presentation here on leadership, got hooked, and within 2 years we'd started the American Leadership Forum. 28 years later, 500 alumni from people around the state building leadership, and a number of you are part of that. And it started at a City Club. I hope you're starting lots of projects now, ways of looking at it differently, and summoning all of us to reach a little further, do things a little different, and do it now. Thank you.
Well, thank you for that. My name is Alan. I work for Verde. I want to start out in the words of Rey España and say it's a blessing to be here with you today and with the folks in the audience. It's not really a panel. It's more of a dialogue between the representative and I now, but I thought I would start out by sharing a little bit about how we started doing this work at Verde and with our partners. And before that, I also want to say that nobody really starts anything, right? We're all really the inheritors of work that was done by countless people in other places, at other times, or here in town. And that as we do this kind of community service work, we should be so fortunate to be in a situation where others want to join us in doing it, and then carry on doing that work after we no longer want to. Thank you very much. And so part of Verde's story, as I understand it, really comes out of two meetings that happened at the start of this century. And it turns out that, or two events. And one of it was a series of meetings that the representative was at that happened at the Multnomah County building. So the first meeting was between the representative and stakeholders from the Latino community. And in this meeting, there were a lot of issues discussed: housing, economic opportunity, immigration. But the main point was community members wanted the opportunity for full participation in the social and political and economic fabric of this place that we live. We wanted opportunity. A few months later, same building, different floor, different folks. Congressman was there, but this time the group was environmental organizations and representatives of then Portland's burgeoning sustainability movement. And the conversation here was more about, we believe that our movement offers multiple benefits to this city. We can make our air cleaner, water cleaner, we can create jobs, we can build education and career pathways. But even in Portland, we can't command consistent political majorities. We're not winning all the fights we should win. And so each group wanted something that the other group could help provide. But other than Congressman Blumenauer, the number of people who were at both meetings was very, very, very small. So the second part of the story was around the same time there's an environmental fellowship that had brought together a number of diverse young environmental leaders from around the country. Some of these folks, very traditional environmental advocates working in Northern California, inventorying fox and wolf populations or what have you, but others are activists of color working in West Harlem on environmental justice issues. Others are Native American poets active in Arizona building a farm based on Native American sustainable principles. And in these long discussions that we had around the table, there was a challenge from the social justice advocates to the environmental advocates, if we can draw that line. Imagine that you're at a strategy session. You're an environmental organization, you're setting your priorities for the legislature, for the coming year. You're an environmental foundation, and you have 10 priorities you're choosing from. 5 of those produce environmental benefits. 5 of them have the ability to produce benefits for low-income people and people of color, in addition to protecting the environment, to support full participation by those communities in our society. Why are we picking from the first 5? Why aren't we picking the environmental priorities that offer full participation for low-income people and people of color in our political, social, and economic world? And so that's really the story. It's kind of like that old Bible story where you have the young upstart coming in because he hears of a great teacher, a great religious teacher, and says, "Hey, I hear you're this really good teacher, and I want you to teach me the Torah while I stand here on one foot." And the teacher doesn't even look up. He just says, could you say that again? What'd you say? He says, "I hear you're really good. If you're so good, you should be able to teach me the Torah while I stand here on one foot." Doesn't look up, just says, "Do unto others as you'd have them do unto you." The rest is just commentary. Now go sit down and study. And so the rest is really just commentary, right? This is what we do at Verde and with our partners. We serve communities by building environmental wealth through social enterprise, outreach, and advocacy. And so in social enterprise, we create environmental businesses to employ and train adult workers, to provide contracting opportunities for minority-owned and women-owned businesses, and to bring new environmental investments into low-income neighborhoods in response to existing community needs. So if you're building a green street, you're building a park, you're restoring a wetland, you're building a new development, we want to talk to you. But we also felt that economic participation in the environmental movement was a participation strategy. And so we do a lot of outreach and advocacy in the community and with our partners and policymakers to build the connection between protecting the environment and making a good living. And so I want to talk a little bit about some exciting work we've been doing for the last few years. And that's a project that we like to call Living Cully. It takes place in Northeast Portland's Cully neighborhood, disproportionately low income, disproportionately people of color, and no surprise, a lack of environmental assets, lack of habitat, lack of parks, lack of streets with stormwater management infrastructure. And so Habitat for Humanity, Portland Metro East, Hacienda Community Development Corporation, Native American Youth and Family Center in Verde, we established Living Cully to address multiple disparities in the community: health, economic opportunity, housing, education, by driving environmental investments into the neighborhood and braiding those investments with traditional community development resources. And so that is what we're trying to do, is to reinterpret sustainability as an anti-poverty strategy, as a way to develop new resources for the community, to turn sustainability into a powerful tool to address the needs of low-income people. And so we're having some success. We're doing some good stuff, and we've been able to attract environmental resources that don't usually come to these kind of communities. We've used those to involve Cully residents in our programs and our projects. So what kind of programs? These programs are where we engage the community so they can design and implement and access these new environmental assets in their communities. And in fact, tomorrow, there'll be a bicycle and walking tour in Cully in a program we call Living Cully Walks, which works with young folks and families to identify barriers to pedestrian and bicycle access to environmental destinations in their community, whether they exist or they're ones that we're building, right? Because that means that they can get there safely. They don't have to drive outside of their neighborhood to get to destinations. And it also builds their capacity to educate policymakers about the transportation changes they want to see in their neighborhoods and how those investments can work. Because we believe that every investment can both improve the environment but address these other issues that we have in our community: health, education, and housing. And so we build stuff, from the NEA-led Cully Weatherization 2.0 to Hacienda rebuilding its Clara Vista campus, to the work that Habitat is doing in critical home repairs, to other projects that you may have heard of, like our attempt to buy the Sugar Shack in Northeast Portland and convert it into a destination that serves communities, as well as the Let Us Build Cully Park project, where we have a public-private partnership with the city of Portland that's allowing us to transform a 25-acre landfill, a brownfield, into a park for the Cully neighborhood, and in a partnership that allows us to control the contracting and hiring. So we're seeing very high numbers of workforce diversity, local hiring, and minority and women-owned business participation. So if you want to help us develop the Sugar Shack, you want to move into it after we rebuild it, we want to talk to you. You want to help us build Cully Park, we want to talk to you. Because by doing these things, what we're doing is we're advancing a community-based model of green infrastructure investment. And we're driving those dollars all the way into the pockets of low-income people and people of color. And this is of fundamental importance. Just like the Congressman was saying, we have long anticipated that this question would change from will Cully's environment improve to will low-income people and people of color get to stay in a neighborhood with increasing environmental wealth. So we're making anti-displacement a core function of our work, not just in Cully, but working with groups like the Coalition of Communities of Color to develop citywide anti-displacement strategies, because as we know, it's not a street-by-street issue anymore, it's not a neighborhood-by-neighborhood issue anymore, it's not a this cultural community or that cultural community, it's a question of who gets to live in this sustainable city if things don't change. So I wanted to follow up on a couple of things you were talking about. The food, I think there's a relationship between getting out of our silos and the approaches we might take to cleaning up the river. And if we have a little time, I'd love to talk to you a little bit about climate change. But with food and this Oregon Farm Bill, how do we work together to bring equity considerations, both engagement of low-income people and people of color in the design of those solutions, but also how do we ensure that producing benefits for those kind of communities is a core aspect of what we're trying to achieve?
The notion that I would advance for singing our own Farm Bill is making sure that we are reaching out to every conceivable interest group that cares about agriculture and food. Last I checked, it's almost everybody, which means no parish should be exempt. Certainly, when we're dealing with the migrant community, this is huge. There are some aspects of Oregon agriculture. What happens with the wine industry, who come together every year, raise hundreds of thousands of dollars for the health care of their workers, totally committed. Others, not quite so much. Being able to engage workforce, being able to deal with what individual producers want, and make this process expansive. I have carrying this message to every group that I get a microphone thrust in front of me. I'm very interested in having a food summit later this spring, being open to people to make it clear that the Farm Bill ought to include what their elements are, and then that we, as a state, go to work to make sure that we are accommodating the interests of across geography, ethnic, particularly income levels, and various industries. I see our having an opportunity to make this inclusive, but most important, to motivate people to take the time to be involved. Because I think there are a lot of folks that have something to say about this who are not likely to show up at a hearing on farm policy or at maybe something at EcoTrust or some of the others of the folks that you're working on that are well-intended and important. I'd like to cast that net wider and to be able to encourage them first and foremost to identify what they want. What would a farm bill look like for them? Only two requirements. It meets their needs and it costs less than the current abomination. I think we could have a lot of fun with it, and I think people could be coaxed out of their shells and making important contributions.
So one of the things that comes out of a process like that is ultimately resources hit the street, right? And one of the things that folks spend a lot of time working on is figuring out how do we create access to those resources for businesses, for workers, for community-based institutions. And so as I was listening to you talk both about singing our Farm Bill, which is a dangerous phrase with two microphones.
You're safe.
Thank you. Thank you. And I also think about it in terms of river cleanup, is maybe talking about, or some of your thoughts on the role of new partnerships, as we've talked about with the public-private partnership that we have on Cully Park. We've been able to bring different sectors together to leverage resources that neither sector was able to command itself. And so I'm wondering what your thoughts are on how public-private partnerships may continue to be used as we're starting to tackle some of these larger issues in our city and region.
One of the things that I think has been embedded in our community better than most is that things don't work if we're not going through the effort to reach out and be inclusive. The extent to which we are more inclusive, the extent to which we're looking at the bigger picture, the extent to which the coalitions are broader, they're more successful. I think that lesson has been learned here, but it's one thing learning the lesson and being able to refine how to apply it, which is why I'm excited about what you are doing with your vision in Cully and thinking about what the school district may do with Madison in the next round of school construction bonds, if the school board decides to go through with it this next year, and I hope they do, focusing on Madison. It serves Cully. There are already some interesting partnerships there. Being able to institutionalize that bigger picture, being able to celebrate what folks have done. I mean, again, I won't bore you with the statistics at TriMet, but the participation rate, I want to say it's like 22% for disadvantaged businesses, women and minorities. I think that percentage is higher in terms of the work hours generated by women and people of color. This is something that is the result of massive effort on the part of TriMet, for which I don't think they've gotten proper recognition. Being able to help people understand what they can do to do it better and to stretch the boundaries of the project. Lincoln High School is probably going to need to be rebuilt. It's one of the most valuable pieces of property in the entire inventory. Portland State has a vision for the future and looking for resources and opportunities. And they're already talking about collaboration between Lincoln and the School of Education at Portland State. But if we can expand that with TriMet, with the state, with the city, maybe we'll find a way to cap that freeway, for instance, and be able to strengthen that linkage. But it can be done with Benson. It can be done. It's being done now in North and Northeast Portland. Using the models we've got, institutionalize, expand, and help people understand that their proposals for public support are going to carry more weight and happen faster if there are more people at this process. The working title that I offered and the City Club thought better of was Bigger Table, Better Menu. And maybe they were smart to do that. But I think that's the principle that ought to underlie it. How do we make that a bigger table we invite more people to and give them better choices to choose from?
So we're a couple of minutes away from Q&A. So the last thing I would want to discuss or share with you is in late January, I was fortunate enough to be with the Native American Youth and Family Center, with the Coalition Communities of Color in the Bay Area, at a convening that the Kresge Foundation had done of their recent grantees, a new program they have on climate resilience, climate action. So very, very diverse group, folks from the Bay Area, folks from Detroit, folks from New Jersey, all over the country. And there was an organized agenda, but then there was an opportunity to propose breakout groups. And so we did, right? And we proposed a discussion on what the relationship is between climate resilience resources, neighborhood stability, and anti-displacement. And about 15 organizations came to that breakout group. There was a tremendous amount of enthusiasm and interest in how do we bring these two things together. There's a lot of work happening locally among anti-poverty organizations, organizations of color, to start to figure that world out. And so I'm just wondering if you have any thoughts generally about building that bigger table around climate resilience. What's the path forward for organizations of color and environmentalist climate action folks to work together as we try to achieve both local and statewide change? Exciting things have happened in California when those kind of partnerships have developed. So particularly maybe a chance to speak to the environmental community in that regard.
Wow. I mean, you're touching on so many interrelated questions. I mean, one of the things we know is that the impacts on climate change in terms of water scarcity and quality, in terms of storm events, fires, flooding, will be disproportionate to low-income communities, people of color. Historically, they have located where the property values are the lowest and where people care the least about putting in the appropriate infrastructure. But the flip side of that is that there is a human response that they want to go back. They're not going to be defeated. I've spent, some of you know, an inordinate amount of time dealing with flood insurance reform and what we do to keep people out of places where God repeatedly shows that they're not wanted. And one of the things that frustrates me is that the first instinct after disaster for many people is to go back, and they're not going to be defeated. And when those people that want to go back and not be defeated are people of color, for instance, you're going to tell them it's not best for them? Do we really want people in the lower ninth ward? If it were rich people had been flooded out in the lower ninth ward, that would be one big park today. But it's a very hard conversation. And it's not just, it's all of us that are a part of that. It's part of the American tradition. In Japan, if you smoke in bed in some of these neighborhoods that are highly flammable, you go to jail if you start a fire that burns down your neighbor. Somebody referenced, if you do that in America, we bring you blankets. We've got to hit that balance in terms of being respectful for people, in terms of what their choices are and should be, giving them better choices going forward, and striking that balance between what people want at the moment and what is in the best long-term interest for the community and for them themselves. And we got a long way to go with that one. Just look at what happened with Hurricane Sandy.
So join me in thanking Congressman Blumenauer for his time. And we're going to enter into Q&A now. So we're now going to take questions from the audience. As always, we invite members to the microphone to ask their question. Asking questions at the Friday Forum is a benefit of City Club membership, and membership is open to everyone. Before asking your question, please identify yourself as a City Club member. Ask your question in 30 seconds or less. And if you've written a question on an index card, please hold it up high so that City Club staff can collect it from you, and I'll read at least one index card question. Thank you.
Roger Meyer, City Club member, and member of the Civic and the Centennial Committees. And I wanted to compliment Congressman Blumenauer for giving national leadership to brain issues. And I wonder what you feel in the next centennial. We're approaching our 100th anniversary here next year. What do you think the City Club can do about these brain issues that you've actually shown leadership nationally as well as in our state? And certainly we appreciate your support of the regional concept of the Brain Institute. What do you think that City Club can do for the next 100 years?
Well, OHSU has one of the finest collection of neuroscience in the country. It's one of the top 3 or 4. And there's nobody in this room that isn't affected by neuroscience issues. Alzheimer's is a tidal wave that's coming, multiple sclerosis, Parkinson's, addiction. I mean, you go through the list of things. And I hope that there's an opportunity for the City Club to focus on what I hope is the next big center of excellence, where some well-intended billionaire might focus on neuroscience and the head start we've got here in Oregon, because I think it will pay huge dividends, and we've got a great base, and it's one of the areas the City Club could help shake things up.
Paul Anthony, City Club member. Representative Blumenauer, could you please say more about your vision for the Central East Side and how that relates to Benson High School?
Well, the Central East Side for years was sort of a stepchild. It was tough to deal with, and the people in the Central East Side didn't always get the broader support they wanted. It was a real challenge. It was a real challenge. But I've been excited. I mean, they've stuck with it. There's been amazing growth and development of the leadership in the Central East Side, and thinking about how to have it all. Because having some of those industrial type jobs there in the heart of a city is really an advantage. But there's also change that's going to be taking place. And we don't want the change to kind of roll over us and happen without our being able to control it. With proper planning, I think appropriate investment and collaboration with the entire community here, the people who surround it and the people who work there and the people that are connected with that innovation quadrant. I mean, there's a great partnership emerging with OMSI, with OHSU, with Portland State, Portland Community College, TriMet, to be able to do some spectacular things. but it's got to be done in a sensitive way. Strategic housing can actually reduce traffic there and have more people who live there, work there. What we do in terms of the management of the parking resource. For years, that was a place that people just parked and walked across the bridge. And people who actually worked there or had business there had problems. And we're moving into traffic control. I mean, this is way above my pay grade now, but maybe thinking about a parking utility for that area and dedicate all those monies to being able to get the infrastructure and the support that the businesses need in that area, and make it, particularly if we're going to tie it from we've got rail, streetcar, bus, maybe bus rapid transit. We could tie everybody in the region to the success there, not choke it with cars, and have a diversity of development that would be unparalleled, I think, anywhere in America.
Good afternoon. My name is Marcela Alcantar, and forgive me, if my heart is beating 110 miles an hour. I'm so excited for all the things you have said that they're dearly to my heart. One of them is agriculture reform, fairness, equality, equity, taxes, believe it or not, but I'm gratefully paying taxes. Thank you to be a successful business. Thank you to TriMet. So in general, the Hispanic group is a very large group when it comes down to numbers. However, when it comes down to contracting and leadership, it's very much underrepresented, particularly on the Latino indigenous groups. With that, my dream, I don't want to make it a dream. Now I have learned after being a successful business that now I can make dreams happen, is to become a co-op for Latino farmers where I can bring it together. However, to get there, I need to work my little self off. And to that, I need opportunities. The current disparity study and waiver that ODET has limited us to participate. We are forced to go out of states to look for work. So now the contribution to our state and our neighborhoods and role models is going to be gone. Your support is very much look for that. Thank you.
David Crandall, City Club member. Congressman, I know you care about our rivers. I assume you're concerned, and I hope you are, about the imminent arrival of mile-long oil trains, coal trains, and a huge propane facility on the river. I'm wondering if you're in a position, and if you will, take action to encourage or require the Army Corps of Engineers to not just grant a blanket approval to those oil trains that are running along the gorge and are liable to pollute not only the river and all the fish, but the air for those of us who live in North Portland.
Well, as you know, we've encouraged broader environmental analysis, but we also need to get our act together because these are fuels, particularly coal, is a fuel from the past. And what we need to do, I think, if I had one policy initiative that I would advance, it is to have a carbon tax. That changes the equities. It changes the economics. A lot of these big facilities, come and go because they're subject to variations in international price signals. But if we had a carbon tax and we're able to dedicate revenues from that carbon tax to infrastructure, to further development, dealing with the impact of climate, and be able to advance research and activity, I think we would be better off, and it would dramatically mitigate these impacts using economics And I want that day to happen sooner rather than later, because a lot of the arguments we have about this tax treatment or this facility or that activity, they go away if we have a price on carbon.
So, my name is Eric Lujano. I'm a civic scholar from Roosevelt High School. And my question is, how are we able to improve being welcoming to immigrants if ever since Obama's come to office, he's had the highest amount of deported immigrants in the United States?
I think the administration has a mixed record when it comes to immigration. I have some sympathy for the president, knowing who he deals with, whose approach is to deport all illegal immigrants, who are willing to shut down the Department of Homeland Security and maybe the government to roll back the steps that the president made, I think a little late, but were important. And that people who continually undermine his effort. He tried to hit a balance where he showed that he was tough so that he could advance a broader, comprehensive immigration reform. And that wasn't met with reciprocal cooperation. I hope that we're able to keep the fight with the advantages that he had, but here again, there will be no substitute for comprehensive immigration reform, and that takes care of driver's cards and these peripheral issues. It gets us to a point where we should be as a nation of immigrants.
We have run out of broadcast time for further questions, and we'll have to stop for the day. As we close, please join me in offering our sincere thanks to Congressman Earl Blumenauer and Alan Ippolito.